The world has changed at an unprecedented pace over the last several decades, especially in the West. This is in contrast to some time periods in human history when change was happening, but the pace was very, very slow. Of course, there have been some other times, such as the Industrial Revolution, when changes were dramatic and really widespread. The thing is that when you live in a time of rapid global change, one of the troubling tendencies is to see yourself as an especially enlightened modern person who has little need to learn from those poor folks back in the past. And this has been a real challenge for modern Christianity, I think. It's been hard for us to be willing to go back and learn from Christians of past centuries because their world just seems so outdated compared to ours. But Hebrews 12:1 points us back to this great cloud of witnesses that has walked by faith before us. And Romans 15:4 says that we find endurance and encouragement when we read in the Scriptures about God's people in former days. Both of those verses may be talking about things recorded in the Bible, but I think there's a principle there that we can apply even to Christian history since the Bible was written. We can learn from the faith of those who have trusted and followed Jesus in very different times than our own. And so now we, very modern people, suddenly find ourselves dealing with something that Christians have been dealing with for the past 2,000 years, and that is a time when a particular disease is spreading in an unusual way. I've been fascinated to see over the past couple weeks how many articles have popped up about Christian history. Suddenly, Christian history matters. Suddenly, we'd like to learn from people who've lived through things like this before. Of course, we've all heard about the influenza pandemic of 1918, and there have been lots of articles written about the Christian response during that time. Kind of ironically, one of the encouraging things for me was to see how the way in which churches should respond was as controversial back then as it's been today. Going back a little bit further, the Spurgeon Center recently put out a great article summarizing Charles Spurgeon's response to the cholera epidemic in London in 1854. There was actually a 14-year cholera pandemic in many parts of the world, but it really struck home in a neighborhood right by the Metropolitan Tabernacle in London in 1854. And I was especially encouraged to see how Spurgeon really, even though he was, traveling preacher in many ways, focused his attention right on his church family and put his time into careful pastoral care during that very difficult time in central London. Going back even further, you can read online a fascinating letter by Martin Luther titled, "Whether One May Flee from a Deadly Plague." You're probably familiar with the Black Death or the bubonic plague that may have cut the population of Europe in half in the 14th and 15th centuries. When it came through Wittenberg in Germany in the early 1500s, Luther and his wife lived through that, risked their lives to serve and take care of people through that. And it was actually after that that another pastor in an area that was getting hit by the bubonic plague asked for Luther's advice, and he wrote this letter. It's very likely that Luther is actually referring to the bubonic plague in the hymn, A Mighty Fortress, when he says that our God is our helper he amid the flood of mortal ills prevailing. Suddenly, Christian history matters. And so let's take this as a good reminder that we have this great cloud of witnesses that has gone before us, and we're never so advanced and modern that we cannot learn a great amount from their faith and their wisdom, even when their setting was very, very different from ours. So let's close with some very old words that might as well be brand new today. Did we in our own strength confide, our striving would be losing. We're not the right man on our side, the man of God's own choosing. Dost ask who that may be? Christ Jesus, it is he. Lord Sabaoth his name, from age to age the same, and he must win the battle.